Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Mom wanted us to rent her property to biker because of her neighbors. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. This is something my mom used to tell just before her passing. We didn't know she was ill, so when she did talk about making a will like this, we thought it was a joke. She didn't actually make a will, and this wish might have been a tad harder to make come true. So Mom loved wildflowers, so much that when we moved to live in a house with a large yard, she let the lawn grow wild to see what would rise if she wouldn't mow. Soon she had a wild field of old flowers from ages ago, which were brought to my country during the 1880s, says Wikipedia. All sort of flowering plants took over, and of course neighbors noticed. Daisies, roses, so many flowers that grow in forests and abandoned gardens. At first, Mom was approached with respect, and people wanted seeds or cuttings of her flowers, and she was happy to share both knowledge and plants. Then the gossip started. Next-door neighbor was at first quite normal woman in her late 40s. She begged my mom to plant some of the wildflowers on her lawn, then had my mom helping her with her property. Mom had serious back pain, shoulder injury that stopped her work and got her on disability pension, and she had severe asthma. This neighbor had Mom try perfumes, work on her own flower beds, and care her lawn, because it's nothing as you care of your own yard anyway. When this neighbor told my mom she would love to buy this property as the wildflowers were so pretty, this would make a perfect lawn to enlarge her backyard, my mom had enough. At the same time, someone else from the neighborhood had made complaints of the children's toys my nibblings had left on my mom's driveway. She didn't have a car, so Mom got orders to clean up the property. She actually got a photo of her yard and was pointed that the toys should not be there. This is why Mom started to talk to us about this property. She had a wish that when she passes, we should demolish the house, tear up all the flowers, pour concrete over the whole area, and rent it to biker gangs to have their meetings. Perhaps we're lucky she didn't write a will. If she had, I wouldn't be living in the middle of these lovely wildflowers in a little old hut in the middle of a very expensive neighborhood. The entitled neighbor tried to get me to clean up her property like she had my mom do. She tried to buy my mom's house from his siblings after Mom died and had loud drunken parties almost every week. Not on weekends, during weekdays. She had non-trained small obese dog that had health issues due to the weight. She said she was a nurse, but I doubted as she had no clue about the difference between virus and bacteria. I'm so glad she sold her house and moved away. By the way, Mom passed 9 years ago. This neighbor moved away 3 to 4 years ago. Maybe to honor your mom's last wishes, preserve the property and wildflowers as best you can, and open a bar with twice-weekly barbecues for biker gangs.
And our second story. You fire me for stealing? I steal your business. My nephew Bob had a job selling cell phones at a store in a mall. The store was owned by a licensed distributor of one of the big-name brands. He was very good at convincing customers to buy calling plans, extended warranties, and accessories that were obscenely profitable. Pretty soon, he was the #1 salesman in the store. The owners asked him to transfer to their other store in a different mall, replacing the assistant manager who they'd just fired. In addition to an increase in his base pay, he'd get a cut of every sale made while he was in charge. It took him about 2 days to figure out why sales were down. Clueless sales reps and lousy management, the manager would disappear for hours at a time, leaving the sales reps to sit around ignoring customers. Most of them would show up late, leave early, or not bother coming in at all. And when they did speak to a customer, they had no idea how to make a sale. On his first day, he outsold them all. After making sure the guys on his shift were actually doing their jobs, especially when it came to selling the high-profit add-ons, the store's sales improved. The store manager saw what was happening and wasn't too happy. He knew it was a matter of time before he was kicked out and Bob took his job. One day they received a shipment of new phones. As usual, Bob signed for them and locked them in the storage closet. The next day was his day off. The manager called and insisted he come in immediately because there was a problem. Overnight, someone had broken into the store and stolen about 100 of these brand new phones. The mall security camera showed 2 people driving up to the back door, opening it with a key, shutting off the alarm, and walking out with the phones. The police were called. He was grilled by the police for a couple of hours, but they had no evidence against him, and he had an alibi. But the manager convinced the owners that Bob was probably involved since he had signed for the phones, had keys to the door and storage closet, and knew the alarm code. Bob argued that they hadn't changed the locks or code after they'd fired the previous assistant manager, and anyone could know about the shipment. But he was fired. Actually, they allowed him to resign, and they stiffed him on his last commission check. At the other end of the mall was a store that sold phones for one of the competing cell companies. They knew that since he had joined the other store, their sales were suffering, and they hired him on the spot. Sales improved overnight. One of his favorite tricks was to stand in front of the store and wait for a customer to walk by carrying a shopping bag from that other store. He'd chat them up about their brand new phone, calling plan, warranty, etc. It's amazing how much the average mall shopper is willing to share with a stranger. Then he'd tell them that they probably didn't need the extended warranty and those accessories could be purchased at Walmart for about half the price. And he could sell them the exact same phone with a better plan for less money. If they agreed, he would walk them back to the other store and tell the clueless sales rep how to avoid that sale he'd just made, then bring the customer back to his store to pick up their new phone. It took about 3 months before the other store closed its doors. And our next story. Sue me! I'm a lawyer. It's the topic of my stories. But I haven't always been a lawyer. I was a law student once. And law students have all the arrogance of a lawyer. 1% of the knowledge, but 10 times the reckless abandon. Here's how that all came together. I moved to D.C. to do the last semester of my law schooling at Georgetown. I jumped on an apartment with 2 other people, but never met the landlord. The people liked me, said I could move in, but they said the landlord had a review process that could take a few weeks, because he's lazy or slow. They also mentioned he was a huge jerk, never fixed anything, hadn't so much as mowed the grass in years, and hadn't paid the light bill in the lobby for months, so we had no porch lights. Whatever, I thought, I needed a place. I asked them if they cared if I moved in that day, though, and they were fine with it. I knew enough landlord-tenant law in D.C. to know that the tenant basically always wins, so long as they're paying and not destroying the property. We used to call it the peeing on the walls rules. So I moved in and just skipped the interview, sent my first check to the landlord right away, a deposit, followed immediately by a month's rent. He deposited them as soon as he got them. A week later or so, he raises hell about me moving in without an interview and threatens to kick me out. I kindly point out that he had accepted my deposit and rent payment, and therefore I was officially a tenant. If he wanted to kick me out, he would have to start the process in court, which is expensive and takes forever. He huffed and left me alone. I quietly paid my rent for months and months, but alas, all good things come to an end, and I had to move out eventually. I emailed the landlord 2 months, then 1 month in advance of leaving. I let him know that he should come inspect the property to make sure I'd not caused any damage that would require my deposit, and that if not, I would like it back. I never heard from him. The time eventually came that I was done living there and moving out. I had everything packed and was ready to leave. I notified the landlord that I would like my deposit back. He said if I wanted it back, I could start the process in court. I smiled. I already knew that was coming. Turns out, Mr. Landlord, those emails I sent you happen to correspond with the exact days and timing that I'm required to give you in order to get my security deposit back. Oh, by the way, that request to come inspect the premises that you never replied to was also part of the process. And by not coming, you have officially waived your inspection as of today, 45 days later or something. Also, I happen to have already filled out the small claim for return of a security deposit. Here's your copy. I'm electronically filing this with the court today. Good luck. And about 10 days later, I got a check in the mail. And our next story. Lie, cheat, lay off, and gamble with our wages? Enjoy no IT department. Years back, I worked as the IT director for a small brokerage firm. These types of places try to run lean, so I was the only IT personnel. I took the job, but was a bit underqualified to be truthful. The reason they gave it to me was because I was young and they thought they could underpay me. They were right. It was $10K more than I'd ever made in my life. I had a crappy job at the time, so I took it for the resume title step. And honestly, it did work out as a good resume builder. I struggled and had to do an endless amount of learning on the job, but made huge improvements. The day-to-day was sketchy there. We had 5 employees supporting the 4 partners and the 70-plus brokers. Brokers didn't really work there. They rented a desk for a percentage, so they didn't care how many brokers there were on staff. There were a couple of gems, but ultimately we were understaffed because they looked at full-time employees like we were stealing from them. They made us work long hours and work weekends with no overtime. Everyone was underpaid or an overpaid buddy of someone. Worse was the crappy partners. The 4 partners were constantly doing shady stuff. One partner would take money from broker commissions and go to Vegas with it. If he lost the money, we're talking $100,000 plus per trip, he would just let the brokers know there's a hold from the bank and their commissions are coming in slow. Another broker asked me straight up how to hide his affair from his wife. Another had me come to his house on company time and install some audio/video equipment after hours without paying me. When I came on board, they were 10 years out of date on technology. I helped them get up to 100% redundant ISP lines, redundant network equipment, off-sided the mail to make it more reliable, dozens of improvements, and everyone was pretty happy. All brokers and employees loved the improvements. Then the partners started doing really sketchy stuff. They had me open employee exchange mailboxes and run mail queries on email addresses. Turns out they were lawyer emails between lawyer and clients, a broker or an employee. They had me do this all the time for anyone. I would have to collect it all, then they would fire them and keep their clients. It's illegal in the brokerage firm to look at them. I didn't know that at the time. They somehow convinced a lending company to merge with them. Totally different crew. They were nice, honest, real customer-focused. I made friends with one of the lending agents. He helped me search for houses on his MLS account on lunch. Nicest guy. His wife and her dad ran the firm until the merger. I found out that the plan was to fire everyone from the firm and just steal the name and the client list. They'd only been there a few months, long enough to learn the business. I also found out they were going to fire me now that everything was more reliable. Guess how I found out? During an email query, one of the partners had me do on another partner. So the only nice people in this crap hole were getting locked out of their offices over the weekend. I was getting fired now that I had essentially made myself redundant in their mind. Well, let me tell you about the red folder. The red folder was locked in my file cabinet. It contained every password for admin access to every system. It also contained the fire plan or downtime plan of every system in the company. My boss didn't really understand why we needed one, and he never really looked at it. Well, I called my friend who worked for the lending firm. I told him to head to the office and grab all the files and computers. They technically belonged to them anyway. I then told him about the plan for changing the locks over the weekend. I told him I was quitting and not to mention me. He said he understood and thanks. I changed the only other admin password that my boss had access to, and I shredded the red folder. I emailed my resignation. They begged me to come back and even offered me a 30% pay bump. They said they were shocked I was so disloyal. I heard years later from a secretary that worked there at the time it took 4 months to get all the systems under control again. They had to use a contractor they'd relied on before. I heard it cost them a year of my salary. TLDR, a group of sleazy brokers run their firm like a candy store. They eat up anyone nice and good and crap them out while stealing and cheating. They plan to fire me after I made improvements to their infrastructure and IT. Well, good luck getting any work done with no passwords.
A neighbor built a house on my Lakeshore. It's a good deal for me. The long-awaited vacation finally arrived after months of hard work, and I wasted no time. After much thought, I decided to visit my countryside property, which I'd neglected for far too long. My house was situated by a small lake surrounded by trees and was almost inaccessible with no proper road leading to it. There were 2 more houses nearby, approximately 500 meters apart. However, when I arrived, my eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. A new house had been erected on my land. Who dared to trespass on my property and build their own dwelling there? I was furious. But before entering into battle, I decided to hire experts to confirm my suspicions. Yes, this is indeed your property, confirmed the real estate lawyer who examined my case. However, we need precise geodetic data, added the surveyor, and I immediately appointed him to conduct the survey. After long days of waiting, the results of the geodetic measurements were obtained. This unfriendly neighbor had indeed built his house on my land, and now he had to answer for his actions. But before asserting my rights, I decided to meet with him and see how he would explain his audacity. "Hey you," I shouted as I approached the freshly built house where my rights had been violated. "What on earth made you build a house on my land?" He came out of the house and gave me an irritated look. "What's your problem? I bought this plot and built my house here." "That's not your plot, it's my property," I protested. "Do you have any documents for this plot?" "Oops, my mistake," I replied confidently. "This plot belongs to me, and I have all the documents to prove it." He frowned even more, but I wasn't going to back down. "Fine, I'll give you part of the plot, but I need to keep my house," he stubbornly declared. "That's unacceptable," I objected. "You should have checked the ownership rights before building. You'll have to demolish your illegal construction, or I'll have to take you to court." "Well, I won't tear down the house," he declared defiantly. "I've spent too much money and time on it." "Then you have two options. Either you destroy your illegal construction, or you give me this plot," I said, feeling that I was gaining control of the situation. He frowned and thought for a long time, then said he needed 1 day to consider everything. The next day, he proposed that I buy the house from him at the cost of the construction materials if I agreed not to take legal action against him. I agreed and also offered him to rent the house at a slightly below market rate. Now I have a guy who takes care of my plot near the river and pays me for it, and since I rarely visit my cabin, it's an excellent arrangement. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.